gentlemen, welcome to this week's edition of the Midweek Mailbag. I'm super excited to be back to the normal 2-episode-a-week format. If you've not seen the previous episode I did this week where I unpacked Trump's first 100 days in office, please make sure to check that out. I would love to see what you guys are feeling about my breakdown of his first 100 days. Now, in this edition of the Midweek Mailbag, I will be covering some show updates, but I will also be spending a large chunk of time defining some important political words. These are terms that are often thrown around in media, and I find that they are often misidentified or misdefined, often intentionally. So we're going to break down some important terms. We're going to talk about the China Donald Trump tariff showdown and whether or not Trump won that. And then I'm going to finish with talking about, is being woke actually a good thing? So starting with some show updates, I want to start with the new podcast art. You guys may have seen it with like my logo or on the YouTube homepage. If you follow me on Instagram, which if you don't yet, make sure you get on that. But I want to shout out my friend Adam who helped design this logo. And I am going to put his contact information down low in the description for this episode. So if you have any art you need done, he's the guy who you should reach out to. Now, additionally, talking about social media, I now do have a Blue Sky and Facebook account associated with the podcast. I would put those links now heading forward in every episode description as well. I will not be joining X at this time as it is currently owned and operated by Elon Musk. If that changes, I may jump back on X, but at this time I have disabled my account with them. Now, social media, I'll be honest, guys, is a little bit of a weakness for me. It's not my strength. I'm working to get better on that. So the Instagram, Facebook posting, things like that. But Instagram currently is where I'm most active. So if you're looking to, reach me or get some posts, get some quotes, things like that, outside of the YouTube episodes, that is the best place to go. Additionally, I am going to start putting out some polls on my Instagram profile where you guys will be able to vote on some future episodes. So please, once again, make sure you are following there. Now, other updates, I am still looking for people who will participate in a debate. Now, I am more looking for people who are more conservative and right-leaning. I have quite a few left-leaning people who I know who would do it, or myself, I could be that representative, but I'm looking for someone to debate a topic of your choosing, really, that is important to you and something that really impacts the everyday American or something that is really like a hot button issue politically right now. So you can reach out to email tjacksunpacks@gmail.com if you are interested in participating in that, or being a guest on the show. So maybe you don't want to do a debate format, but you want to be a guest. I'm happy to have guests on. I have one coming up who will be discussing what it's like living in, she actually lives in South America right now. So she's going to talk a little bit about that experience being or living outside of the United States as someone who was originally born in the United States. I have someone else coming to talk about climate change. She currently works in sustainability. And I also have a nurse who will be coming on to talk about the healthcare system. So if you guys are interested in being on, please reach out. I'll try to make you feel as comfortable as possible. Now, that's enough with the show updates. Let's jump into some important definitions. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, I think it's important that we discuss these definitions so we can lay the groundwork of what we are talking about when we use and when we hear these terms. I feel like our mainstream media and our journalism landscape often fails at educating the public of certain terms, and more damaging is when people come on shows and misuse terms. They're often not corrected and they're not held accountable often to some false information. So we're going to discuss some important terms, starting with oligarchy. So oligarchy is a term that's been around for a very long time, but it has become more in vogue, let's say, due to really wealth inequality. And we also have the oligarchy or Fight the Oligarchy tour that's been a huge success by Bernie Sanders. So oligarchy in its simplest terms is simply a small group of people controlling a country. That I said simply a few times, but I think you guys get the definition. Small group controlling the country. Now in the United States, we are hyper capitalistic to the point of like late stage capitalism, I would argue, or we're approaching that, where money buys power. And that includes, unfortunately, in our corrupt political system, right? We have politicians who can participate in the stock market. We have politicians who can take like as much campaign donations as they want. So bribery, right? We see this time after time after time again. So when you talk about oligarchy in the United States, and I know when I use it, when Bernie Sanders is using it, when it's used politically, we are talking about the 1% uber elites who we know run this country. So we're talking about like Murdoch from Fox News, right? Controlling that media landscape. Elon Musk, right, controlling X. A lot of, if you guys remember when Donald Trump did his State of the Union, I don't think he called it a State of the Union, but whatever. Traditionally, it was called a State of the Union. He had a bunch of, or maybe this was even his inauguration. I'll find the picture and post it for you guys while I'm talking. But he had a bunch of tech oligarchs behind him in his front row in front of his cabinet. That's the 1%, right? The owners of Google, people, Zuckerberg, right? People like that, the uber rich who control a lot of, you know, the means and the production of this country and the way the country thinks. And honestly, people who control our politicians, that's what we're talking about. So when we're talking about fighting the oligarchy, we're talking about doing things like raising taxes or eliminating tax loopholes so these rich oligarchs who are, you know, controlling our politicians have to pay their fair share. Right? Things like that. Raising the minimum wage so that that wealth is spread out more evenly and isn't concentrated in the hands of CEOs, for instance, right? So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about oligarchy and oligarchy taking form in the United States. Now, the next term that has been used a lot is fascism. Now, I am someone who wholeheartedly believes, based on the evidence that I see, that fascism is taking root in the United States. And I'm going to explain why, starting with the definition. So, fascism, generally speaking, is a populist political philosophy, movement, or regime that exalts nation and often race above the individual. That is associated with a centralized autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader, and that is characterized by severe economic and social regimentation and by forcible suppression of opposition. So guys, what we have right now is that exact thing taking place under this administration. Let me work backwards and start with the end. Forcible suppression of oppositions. This administration has already abducted, taken away, put in jail people who have wrote like op-eds against the genocide that's happening in Gaza, right? Suppressing speech. Trump has come out and said certain news organizations who he disagrees with should be illegal. Forcibly trying to restrict funds from Harvard University, for instance, like that could be suppression of speech, right? Through education. And what you see in terms of an autocratic government and a dictatorial leader, we are losing our systems of checks and balances. Our executive branch, which is our president, is trying to basically just push things through without going through the systems of checks and balances. So without, for instance, with Doge, a lot of the huge problems and a lot of the failures there was Congress has the power of the purse. And what that means is funds that Congress has appropriated, the executive branch, the president can't then go, no, cancel that, or no, it needs to go to something else. That's illegal. That's unconstitutional. You can't do that. Now, up to this point, the judiciary, so judges have, for the most part, upheld the Constitution, so that's good to see. But guys, we are only in like day one, around 120, maybe-ish, give or take. So there's a lot more coming the way coming to the judicial branch that they will have to block. All of this, and I mentioned this, guys, in the Unpacking 100 Days video, with immigration, with tariffs, different things like that, it's to centralize power. And that is, sorry if I hit the mic there, but that is a clear indication of fascism, okay? And I want to add one more thing about fascism. The importance of it is loyalty. Okay, it's not about doing the right thing, but it's loyalty to a leader or to a regime. And you cannot tell me right now that the president doesn't value loyalty above anything else. It's not performance. Look at his cabinet. His cabinet that he assigned is a joke. They're incredibly underqualified. But he watched things like Fox News and figured out who talked best about him and who would be most loyal, and that's who he appointed. Okay, that is another key sign of a fascism taking place. Now, our rights are also being eroded, as I mentioned, with freedom of speech, due process, not because anyone broke laws, guys, but because this current administration is just trying to silence certain groups of people who are mostly non-white immigrants. And at this point, guys, the Republican infrastructure is just about loyalty to Donald Trump. It's not about principles. It's not about legislation that would benefit me or you. It's about what Trump wants, what will enrich him, what will fluff his ego. And if you dare to speak out against him, ask the Cheneys, he will eradicate you from the party. So that's, in a nutshell, what the Republican Party is. It's fascism taking root and loyalty to dear leader Trump. Now, another term I want to jump into is communism. So I think this one, and then I'm going to talk about socialism a little bit. I think those two have been the most inaccurately described in mainstream media. Believe it or not, guys, there has never been a true communist country towards the 100% way. Even countries that have been named like communist countries, they are not. No country in history up to this point has been fully communist. But what communism is a political ideology that aims to eliminate class systems in the profit-based economy by shifting from private ownership, to public ownership of at least the major means of production, like factories. So it is the kind of anti-capitalistic approach where the government basically has means to control major production. Now, what makes this different than socialism is communism is a more extreme form where the government controls more aspects of everyday life. Okay, both socialism and communism, their goal, guys, is to redistribute resources more equally to make sure like what we have now doesn't take place where people can work very, very hard for very little because all of the wealth is concentrated at the top. So you basically, the low end workers are working to help feed the mouse at the top. Okay, so communism and socialism try to fight that, but socialism tends to allow more privatization and less means of control. So for instance, guys, like the fire stations, right? Firefighters, that is a socialism based policy, right? We pay taxes, it benefits the majority. Same with police, same with education. As someone who's a progressive, I think we should be putting more money into public education, okay, and less money into privatization of education. I think that bears out in research in a lot of other countries as well that invest in public education and in some circumstances even make private schools illegal. So unfortunately, where I feel like we're at and why so many of us are struggling is we're at late stage capitalism, where so much of our work and our effort and our resources that we generate as average Americans have overwhelmingly filtered to the top. And it becomes very difficult now for the average American to reach the American dream that we were, taught or spoon-fed when we were younger. Now, guys, the reality of our current government and our current economy is we live in a mixed economy, okay? Where there are some socialism parts, there are some capitalistic parts, right? As a progressive, I want more socialism policies like safety nets, for instance, for people who lose their jobs. I'm a big fan of Social Security and raising the cap so that we even get better retirement benefits when we do enroll in Social Security. So I want you guys to understand that socialism already exists in the United States, right? You don't want the police force to be privatized and only go to people who have money. I mean, maybe you do if you're a rich person and don't think that through ethically and what that would mean for people who couldn't afford police, for instance, or firefighters or schooling, for instance. But in a socialistic viewpoint, how I view it as a progressive, guys, things like the food you buy, generally speaking, the type of car you would pick, the type of home you would want to live at, right? The brand of shoes, that's not controlled by the government. It's more like the basic necessities and safety nets that we need to survive. All right, next thing that has come up a lot is due process. So I'm going to read I'm going to do kind of a layman's term. And guys, it's innocent until proven guilty. Now, no state may deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And once again, guys, that just means the idea of being innocent until you are proven guilty. We are unfortunately seeing that idea being torn apart right now under this administration. We have mass disappearances by ICE with no due process, right? There is just presumption of guilt right now of certain groups of people by the administration, and that is all they are using to snatch people up, deport them sometimes out of the country, sometimes to different states, and really upending their livelihood in many situations. Now, if you are okay with this, the first thing I would just do is I would ask you to check your morals at the door, because these are human beings, and I want to reiterate, they are getting rid of people who have done nothing wrong in some situations. Without due process, guys, how do you even know if they did anything wrong? That is the entire, that is so dumbfounding to me. If we don't have due process, you cannot tell me these people are guilty because they never went through the process to figure out whether or not they were innocent or guilty, right? People in this country are innocent until you can prove otherwise. And this administration is just completely ignoring that fact. And do you guys just believe our politicians are whether you're a Democrat or Republican, do you trust our politicians enough to make that decision? Seriously? Just whoever they want, whoever they deem no due process, this person needs to go. That's insane. Okay. If that is allowed to take place and that foundational right is removed and they can just snatch anyone off the street and transfer them wherever they want, this can happen to everybody. That needs to get through your head if this isn't clicking yet. That is why this is so terrifying, not just from the standpoint of you should just care about other people because they're human beings, but also this can happen to anyone who speaks out against this administration if this is allowed to happen. Okay. Now that wraps up some of the definitions of some important terms and context with how those terms are used. I hope you guys found that useful. Now, the next question was about, did Trump win versus China in terms of his tariff policy? And when reading up on this, the AP, so the Associated Press, actually did a good timeline of chronicling Trump's tariffs worldwide, but I really wanted to focus on China since he really had his eyes focused on China for years. And the reality is China is our biggest competitor in the global economy. So even before he did tariffs, guys, while he was campaigning, he said he would impose at least 60% on all Chinese imports if he was elected. Now, fast forward to this year, February 1st, he announced that 10% tariffs on China would set to enact on February 4th. On the 4th, when they did start taking place, China retaliated with countermeasures targeting American companies, specifically coal, natural gas, and agricultural machinery. They also launched an anti-monopoly investment into Google. On March 4th, so a month later, additional 10% tariffs were put on all Chinese goods. And China responded with an additional tariff of up to 15% on imports of key U.S. farm products like chicken, pork, soy, and beef, and expanding controls on doing business with key U.S. companies. Now, on April 3rd, which Trump called Liberation Day, which was a joke, he announced additional 34% duties on all Chinese imports alongside tariffs on goods from countries around the world. And these would come into effect on April 9th. On April 4th, China announced additional retaliatory moves, including more export controls on rare earth minerals. And they filed a lawsuit against or at the World Trade Organization, not against the World Trade Organization, but at the World Trade Organization. So guys, did Trump win this? Absolutely not. Okay. If you have been following this, I think you're pretty clued in now to tariffs just being a tax. So you can say whatever you want. You can, try to make it all fancy. When he is doing this trade war nonsense, it is making products we buy more expensive. It is making our grocery bills more expensive. Because what happens very simplistically, when the items come from other countries, they are taxed. The people who buy them from other countries need to pay that tax. So to cover that tax, they raise the prices. Okay. It's very simple. That's why products get more expensive. The strategy he's trying to do, which he does over and over and over again, is he makes up a problem like that this trade deficit thing is a huge issue or bigger than it is. He doesn't understand trade policy, by the way. And then exacerbates the problem. And then he claims that he fixed it and that everything is great. Remember, guys, with TikTok, he said he brought it back, yet he was the one who stirred up all the controversy to get rid of it. So it's Trump 101. He just hopes his followers and people who support him don't follow the fact that he's the ground root of the problem he then claims that he fixes, okay? He has also drastically miscalculated, in my opinion, the pride of other people around the world. So although he surrounds himself with yes men who grovel at his feet, that is not the reality around the world. And that's not even the reality in the United States. He is deeply unpopular right now based on where he's at in his first 100 days. People have love for their country, just like you may be listening, have great love for the United States. And I also love the United States in terms of its ideas, like what we should live up to. I do not love what we're doing right now, but I love the idea and what we should be and what, when we founded this country, some of the ideologies we are shooting for. But trying to bully every country into submission as your only tactic is terrible leadership. It shows no level of diplomacy. And like I said in the Unpacking 100 Days, I think it's going to have long-term detrimental impact with our foreign allies, unfortunately. All right, last but not least, is being woke a bad thing? This actually came from an in-person conversation I had recently, and it's not the only time I've had this conversation. It actually came up in a board game that I played, but I think it's interesting how divided we are on this word, largely because I don't think we agree to what we are talking about when we use the word. I do not think being woke is a negative connotation whatsoever. I think my interpretation is it's just the modern day version of being enlightened, or more simplistically, just to be aware of the changing times and how things work in present day. Because whether or not you want it or not, we'll always progress forward. The world's always changing. We are always going to move forward. There'll always be new advancements. So I look at woke as just being aware of those advancements and being in touch with present day reality. I think a lot of people who are against woke, it's a lot of intellectually laziness, right? It's like they're just stuck in their ways. They want things to be how they are. And the idea about thinking about something differently is just too much work or frustrating. And people who are anti-woke just want to keep things the way they are rather than taking the effort to adapt to society, even though, once again, guys, society will always change whether you like it or not. I also do have a little empathy with that because change can be scary. Like, I'm not saying it's an easy thing to, like, I don't know, go into an uncomfortable situation or do something quote unquote woke, whatever, you may think that is. So that can be scary, but growth comes from those uncomfortable situations and learning new things. So, and I just want to leave with this, right? And why I think it's so important to like be woke, meaning like learn new things, educate yourself, put yourself in new situations. Is I think anyone can basically be a good person when things are going well, right? When you don't have to address difficult situations. Think about going on vacation, guys. Everyone's in a good mood, basically, unless someone gets sick or something happens. Like, vacation is where everyone is in the best mood because everything's going well, right? But I think a person's character is defined by how they act and how they behave when things are going tough. When things are not easy, when you have to put yourself in difficult situations, how do you react? So I just wanted to leave with that. I think that's an important lesson. I think that's something I really think about, and not to be preachy, guys. One thing I try not to do is be preachy as much as possible because you guys are your own people. Make those decisions for yourself. But that is just my perspective on being woke. And maybe I'll do a future episode on that as well. So that wraps up, guys, this edition of the Midweek Mailbag. Thank you for listening. Once again, I'm excited to be back on the 2 episode a week grind. If you have any questions, you can submit them to me via email at tjacksunpacks@gmail.com. Do not forget to do all those fun YouTube things. So like, share, subscribe, comment, all of those things. And check out me on social media, Facebook, Instagram, or Blue Sky. So until next episode, guys, see ya. Thank you for watching and being part of a growing progressive community. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And if you have the time, check out some of my other episodes you can see around me. Thank you.